Welcome to Sage Intacct Core Dimensions. I am going to be focusing on the entity, location, department, employees, vendors, and customers, and your item type of dimensions. I'll also mention the warehouse dimension, and that is if you have inventory. The other dimensions in Intacct are related to industries or other optional dimensions. So for example, there are some other dimensions for construction like project, cost code, and cost type. I'm going to be focusing on the core dimensions, however. So first off, what is a dimension in Intacct? Generally speaking, a dimension is a way to organize, analyze, and report on your data. So for financial reporting, for other reports, dashboard filtering, there are many uses for dimensions in Intacct. Those are just a few examples. So it's a way to tag your transactions in different fields. So for example, you put a location and a department on an AP bill, and it's a way to organize that data in a report so that you can get a departmental P&L, for example. Okay, so those are just some use cases, which I'll show here in a little bit on how you can use your dimensions. So I'm going to show a little bit of the setup, and then we'll go into some examples and talk about how it's used in the system. So first, I'm going to navigate to my menu, and I'm going to go to Company, Setup, Entities. Generally speaking, entities are entities that have a separate federal tax ID number. So you can see I've got my various entities here, my IDs, my name, and all of them have different federal tax ID numbers. Okay, so generally speaking, that is what an entity will be used for in Intacct. I'm going to go into one that is already set up, but normally you're going to hit the Add button here. So my Timberline Development entity, I give it a short ID here for reporting, for dashboard filtering, for input. The Timberline Development is my longer, usually that's going to be your legal name. You're going to put your federal tax ID number here. Optionally, there's some more fields here, but notice there's no asterisks, so they do not need to be filled in. The Enable as the elimination entity, that will be covered in the multi-entity videos that we have, but this is something you will turn on if this is an elimination entity when you're doing consolidating types of financial reporting. I can set my colors here. So the color here and the bar when I'm in that entity. And then also down here, you want to make sure you turn on your 1099 information here and fill out this section. So you're going to fill the legal name in, address, city, state, zip. This will allow your entity to report 1099s separately for each vendor. So a lot of the time your vendors will be shared if you're in a multi-entity environment. This will then allow you to report 1099 amounts for each entity separately. For example, from Timberline Development and Timberline GC. Okay, so if they pay the same vendor, that will allow those to be reported separately when you run 1099s. So make sure to fill that in. If you're a calendar year, your first fiscal month is going to be January. If you're a fiscal year, be sure to change that first fiscal month if your fiscal year is different than a normal December month end. Optionally, you can use some different titles for your reports if you'd like. In the calendar, this isn't used too often, but if you use time and expenses and input time or import time into the system, this calendar can be used. However, this is also set in a different area as well. So this is optional. And then your date of operation is also optional. Notice there's no asterisk here for required field. Okay, so you can input in if you'd like, but you do not have to. Once that's all in, you're going to hit save, and your entity now is added into the system. Okay, now I'm going to talk about locations. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go to my next tab, and I see my location tab displaying my various locations in the system. So I'm in Company, Setup, Locations, and I have as you can see, various locations set up already. I also have a parent ID. Notice this is the entity ID. So a location is actually a sub-entity. What I mean by that is that Beaverton, for example, is one-to-one relationship with Timberline GC. So I cannot also use Beaverton in another entity. Okay, so let me show you the screen here. When I hit add, the location has to have a parent, which is the entity. So if you have various locations and you want to report on the various locations across all entities, you have to set up the locations under each entity. Okay. So for example, I cannot have the same location. I have to give it a unique identifier. And now I've just created a Beaverton location under the Timberline development entity. Okay, so in financial reporting, I can group these Beaverton ones together to report my Beaverton overall results across all entities. Okay, so what some people are doing is they're putting Beaverton dash entity at the end, so location dash entity, or they're flipping it and they're putting entity in front like this, dash the location. Okay, so just know that it is one-to-one with location and entity. So just some alternative approaches. So entity dash location, got my entity here. This one was just purely location only, or you could do location dash entity. Okay. Now I'm going to navigate over to departments. So departments are in the same area. It's going to be company setup departments. You can see here a sample set of departments. Notice I do not have any sort of entity or location relationship. So departments can be used across all entities and all locations. So it's a simple ID and simple name, and that is all that is required for setup. A department is generally used as a functional part of your business. So as you can see, operations, plumbing, sales, marketing, etc. So to tie this all together, on an AP bill screen, for example, you can see that I have various fields down here in the details. So you can see the department field here. I can pick no matter what entity or location I would pick in the next field. So if I picked Beaverton MEP, for example, I can use any of these departments across any entity or location field. Okay. And remember and note that the location field also is the entity field all over Intacct. Because remember, entities and locations are one-to-one. So what a lot of people are doing, as you can see, they're naming it Beaverton entity, Beaverton dash dev entity. So you can easily tell which one goes with which entity. Okay, which location goes with which entity. Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about the employee dimension. So I'm going to come up here, and here's a list of some example employees. So I'm in the time and expenses, all employees area. So the employee dimension is going to be used if you are processing Sage Intacct payroll and you're using the payroll area in the system. If you are importing time in to the employee dimension, so if you're just going to import timesheets, you can use employees as well and should. Also, employees are used when you're on a project screen. You're going to put the project manager on that project. So they need to be set up as an employee in order to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go into the employee setup screen here. Normally, you're going to hit add. You can also import employees in as well. So here is an example employee. Notice that my employee ID sequences. So it's going to create its own ID. You don't really need IDs in Intacct as much as other systems because you can just start typing this name, for example, and he will populate or pop into the field in the input screens. Okay. The information here, you would fill in all of these fields. Notice only the ones, again, that are required have the asterisks next to them. So here are my other dimensions. So multi-dimensional system where I have the employee, department, and location on a transaction. I can get then all of my time for Beaverton, all of my time for the operations department with all of my employee time in a report. So multi-dimensional reporting in Intacct is all over. Okay, so there's my department location that we were just showing a little bit ago. There is another optional dimension called class that's not used too often, but can also be used. The earning type here, the field position, if it's a 1099 type of contractor, you can set them up as an employee as well. So all of this information can be filled in here on this front screen. Again, only required with the asterisks. You have your contact tab here, your cost rates, your reimbursement information. Okay, so if you're going to ACH this particular employee through payroll, for example. So your employee setup is pretty simple. You can also import to this screen as well. That is the use case for what you would use an employee for. And that is the overview of the employee dimension. Now I'm going to talk about the vendor dimension. So in Intacct, we're going to navigate to accounts payable, all vendors. And here you can see a list of all vendors in the system. So I'm going to navigate to one that is set up, but again, you're going to hit the add button to set up a new vendor. Notice also the vendor ID is sequenced. So I'm going to edit one of these that is filled out to show a sample. We have the ID that will sequence automatically. You're going to put your name in. You're going to put your information in here. Also, the additional information tab, you're going to set some terms. You're going to set a type if you'd like. You also could set your 1099 information here as well. The payment information, you're going to have some information for your ACH, or if they prefer a check, then you will also set up your ACH information for that vendor here as well. So vendors are used in the system to pay bills, to set up your subcontracts and your POs and your related invoices in purchasing. So they are used as another dimension in the system. You could report on all of your electrical, drywall type of vendors and make a list. You can do various things with all these different tags and dimensions in the system, but a vendor would be used for those specific types of transactions. They could also be typed here with the type ID, and you can create a list or a report or create expenses, all my consultant expenses using the vendor type here if you'd like. Okay. So just think of a dimension in the system. It's like a tag on a transaction or a setup screen that we then could use for reporting, filtering, various different automations as well. And now I'm going to go into an overview of the customer dimension in accounts receivable. Here's a list of some sample customers. So I'm going to hit edit here. So here's an example of a customer setup screen. The ID is going to sequence. You're going to put in your name. You can set different statuses here. You've got your information here on this screen to fill in. Again, you can import customers in to all these fields. You have types of customers. You can do territories, for example, terms, how you're going to send information out of the system. Okay. So just a quick overview of this dimension. We go into more detail when we actually go through some planning sessions with you. But this is an example overview of the customer dimension. Okay. So where are customers used? They're used in accounts receivable when you invoice. They're used on the screen when you set up a project. You're going to assign a customer to that project so that when you do project invoicing, that customer is on that transaction. So it then will be on your accounts receivable aging report. Okay, so customers are used mainly in the revenue cycle. So now I'm going to jump over to the items area. So items in purchasing, for example, I have an inventory item list here. I also have some construction items at the bottom, which I will show you. So items can be imported. So you can see a list of, for example, various inventory type items. So just to show you the screen, a quick glance here. I've got an inventory item ID, the name, and I've got all of my different types of units of measure, some conversions. I've got pricing. So I've got various information here. I also have warehouses. So warehouse is also another dimension if you have inventory that you can use to track where and how much by warehouse these items in the inventory, how much has been sold and purchased through this warehouse, for example, for this specific item. So items in warehouses are used heavily in this example if you have inventory. So just a quick sample, what's on this screen, but item is another dimension, another transaction field that you can pick on your screens. Like for example, when you're buying goods, you have an item field in that screen. So I'll show you that here in a second. So at the bottom of my items list here, I have some other items that are not inventory. So all of these with the INV are inventory type items. These here at the bottom that say labor, materials, other, overhead, subcontract. So these are related to construction. So when you look at a cost type screen, which is a specific construction dimension, over here in my cost types, so this is my standard cost type list, the item is required with your cost type. So it's a Sage Intacct, how they build cost types with items in the system, where I am going to be using this item dimension with my cost type. Okay, so that usually they mirror each other. So in construction, you usually use equipment, a labor, a materials, a subcontract, and an other cost type. Okay, the item needs to be filled in on the cost types. It's a requirement of Intacct. Okay, so just note that when you're going through and learning about dimensions. Okay, so for cost types, they're going to mirror, the item is going to mirror the cost type. One item I do want to cover, I'm going to navigate back to a customer screen, for example. There are different list views that you can use called Enhanced List, where it changes the look of this list. It also allows for more filtering. So when this comes up, I'm going to show you the different view that can be used instead of the one I was on. Okay, so this is the enhanced list. The other one, I guess you would call it like a standard list. But this one is a little easier to filter on. So I could just start typing a name, hit enter, and I can filter on any part of the name in my list here. Okay, so now I got that one. So it's a little easier than the other list in a lot of regards, where you're going to have more options for filtering, sorting quickly by using the filters, advanced filters on the right, by clicking on a column heading to sort. So you can see I can do different criteria and different sorting here. So just wanted to point that out real quick. So when you're looking around in the system, you're getting familiar with dimensions. Sometimes these views are pretty handy. Now, during our deployment process, go back over here to the vendor screen. These are imported during our deployment process. So we walk through import templates with you. So you aren't going to be adding these one by one. Your vendors, your customers, your employee list, those longer lists will be imported in during our deployment process. So I just want to get you familiar with what the dimensions are, but these will be imported in. Now I'm going to tie this all together and show some examples of the reporting and things you can do with the dimensions once you have data in the system. So I'm going to show some profit and loss statements, and we're going to go through some of the dimensional reporting, the multi-dimensional reporting that we can do with Intacct. So I'm going to navigate to So in my reports area here, I have financial reports. So I'm going to navigate there for some examples. I'm going to run this profit and loss by location financial report. I'm going to change my date here. And notice I have a department filter I can put on. I have a location filter I can put on as well. Okay, but I'm going to run this without any filters. And you can see, zoom in here, you can see that the different locations are up here at the top. Okay, so depending on how I have designed this financial report to expand, it's going to show my locations here at the top for any transactions in the month. So this is a monthly column. All of the transactions that hit these locations are showing. So I'm not showing locations with zero activity, but Beaverton, for example, had some activity in December, San Jose and Tacoma. So the Timberline GC is my entity. So these roll up to my Timberline GC entity, depending on how I have my design in my report built. Okay. So I can just have entities only. I could have this where my departments are showing, there's a profit and loss by department standard report as well set up. But all of these numbers here are specific to Beaverton, for example. So if I click in there, I'm going to see my location on all of these transactions. So when I drill into example, this accounts receivable journal, I'm going to see that transaction line has that location dimension on it. So that is how it ties to financial reporting with the multi-dimensional structure. Also on dashboards, we do have a filter that you will also have on dashboards that has a location filter, for example. Okay, so let me just show you the project performance one. I have a location filter here where I'm going to drop down to, for example, Beaverton. I'm going to hit apply. And now it's going to show me metrics and data filtered for Beaverton, and my project manager, Doug Moffitt, was on there already. So there are more filters. There's, the as of date, that's a date filter, but there are more dimensional filters here in the settings where you can put even a customer, all the dimensions that I've covered. I can put a customer filter on. I could put a vendor filter on. I can do all sorts of filtering here on my dashboard beyond the location, project, and date. Okay. So again, with reports as well, financial reports, my custom reports, the ones that are job specific, project specific, customer reports, agings. I have all sorts of dimensions I can use in the system to help me filter, to help me organize, sort, put on the X and Y axis of my statements, There's all sorts of different ways you can organize the data if you're using these multiple dimensions. So that is an overview of the Sage Intacct core dimensions. Please also watch our content on construction dimensions and optional dimensions.